Greetings, Visual Effects Society members. Today is Friday, May 22nd, 2020. The time is 11 o'clock a.m. Pacific Standard Time from across the pond from our guests. My name is David Tanaka from the Visual Effects Society Board of Directors and also a former chairman for the Visual Effects Society Northern California Bay Area section. It is an honor to be here today as your moderator for this edition of VES Pros Home Edition, a webcast series produced by the Visual Effects Society, providing live professional conversation regarding the craft of visual effects and the talented individuals behind the scenes, directly to the VES membership via the remote comfort of your home, especially in these unprecedented times. Today's topic, inside the VFX of Jim Henson's The Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance, will begin shortly. But before we roll into it, I just wanted to go over a few details regarding our live webcast. Let's see, the presentation should run about an hour. We are also recording this live event, which will be posted on the VES website soon after. Details to follow about that later on. During the presentation, if you have a question, go to your Zoom toolbar located at the base of the screen, click the Q&A icon, and go ahead and type a question. We'll do our best to try to answer as many questions as possible during the session. Okay, let's begin. Let me start by giving just a little bit of background on our topic. The Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance is a 10-part miniseries produced by Netflix and the Jim Henson Company. Although fresh, highly imaginative, state-of-the-art and new, its roots go way back 38 years to the original theatrically released motion picture, The Dark Crystal, in 1982, which was directed by Jim Henson and Frank Oz. The new series is a prequel to the classic film, but rather than me describing it any further, let's just go ahead and show the trailer to The Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance.
There we go.
Froud. At its center, the crystal of truth, the source of all life. The Skeksis have corrupted it. And now our world is at risk from the darkening.
What is the darkening?
Behold.
I saw something. A vision.
Read too many stories.
No, this was real!
Everything the Skeksis ever told us was a lie. And now everyone and everything is at risk. Join me, so we may finally unite as one against our true foe, the Skeksis.
We are eternal!
Resistance is forming.
Are you sure about this?
But I have hope.
Behold the power of the darkening!
Hope is fragile. Precious. Hope catches the light, splitting the darkness, revealing your destiny.
I don't think anything will ever be like it was again.
No, it will be better.
All right. right. Let's see. Since its release on Netflix last fall, The Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance has received numerous praise from viewers, Dark Crystal fans, and critics from around the world. And it also has received numerous awards, nominations from within the entertainment industry, including winning a Visual Effects Society Award for Outstanding Special Effects in a Photoreal or Animated Project. Today, we are honored to welcome to the show two of the key Age of Resistance crew members, creature and costume design supervisor Toby Froud, and visual effects supervisor Sean Matheisen. Toby and Sean, on behalf of the Visual Effects Society, welcome. It's a pleasure to see you both. Congratulations on the show.
Thank you.
You both seem relatively unscathed, surviving Gexies and spiders and assorted pointy objects.
We've had a while to recover.
Yeah.
I guess what we'll do is we'll kind of follow the steps in production from beginning to end, pre-pro production, post-production. I guess the logical place to start is to go with what brought you to this special project.
You know, Toby, I'm going to go first because your story is by far more engaging. So, I was a fanboy, and I remember the movie when it came out, and it was definitely shaped my dreams and desires for what I would choose to do over the course of my life to where I eventually arrived here. But as I say, that story is by no means interesting compared to Toby's connection with product.
It's
Toby, do tell.
I mean, well, basically, it's been in the family since before I was born. Actually, my parents, Brian and Wendy Froud, Brian was the original designer of the movie, and Wendy was the designer and creator of the Gelflings and all sorts of other things. But they worked together. They met on Dark Crystal via the Henson Company and worked closely with Jim and the team and built the original film. So it's been, and that was before I was born, because I was born after on the other film, Labyrinth. So it was. But it's been in the family, I grew up with it. I grew up with hearing from people, professionals and fans my whole life this is the movie that got them into the industry. And this is the movie that got me into the industry. I mean, this is something that's truly spectacular. In the original, the techniques, the puppetry, the sheer scale of it was just astonishing. So it's been with me, been with our family, but also with the fans for now 38 years. And then when over the years, my parents have been involved with HENSON'S, potentially doing a second Dark Crystal, it was always, potentially exciting. And as I grew up, it was always, oh, maybe this is happening. I don't know. But it wasn't until Netflix said yes and the series, was developed that we, as now the Frouds and myself having grown up and gone into the industry myself, were able to be a part of it, and I'm grateful for the timing, actually, because it wouldn't have worked out if I was any younger, I don't think. But it's amazing, the sheer scale of what we achieved on the show, beyond what the film did, and to sort of come into it with this strange knowledge of understanding of what the Froudian aesthetic and feel of the Dark Crystal is just ingrained in my head, I think, was amazing. I'm just honored to have been a part of it.
Toby, doesn't a lot of the aesthetic comes from actually where you grew up here in England? Isn't that true?
Yeah.
Just to throw you a bone. Another thing to
That's
talk
true.
about that,
Yeah,
that
I
I
mean,
think
it
is
really
important.
does. It was my parents lived down in Devon on Dartmoor, and it's that landscape that really drove most of what my father's landscapes feel like. It's part of the land that he lives in and has done for years, and that started with the book Fairies in the 70s, and so it really it's driven him in his creations, and that's what happened with Jim. He originally came down to Devon and met Brian, and they went walking on Dartmoor, and Brian showed him the landscape, and Jim went, I want it to be like this. Now in turn, years later, Louis Leterrier, the director of this, came to Devon and visited my parents in the home, same house where Jim saw them, and they took him walking along Dartmoor and the rivers there, and he said the same thing. This is what it should feel like. It's one of those amazing places that has sort of driven creativity for artists who gather there.
I think for me, I visited maybe a few years after the film came out, but I visited England the first time maybe 4 or 5 years later, and I went down into that part of the country and through the moors, and I liked it so much that I've now lived here for 20 odd years.
Yes.
It is magical and enchanting. It must have been amazing as a place to grow up, but it's even just to visit, it's an incredible place.
So Toby, I guess it's fair to say that you were literally created through the Dark Crystal.
Yes, I believe so. I was. I feel like I am truly a part of Froud, however strange that may be, but yes.
We have to check for stitches, skins, puppets. Is there anybody behind you?
I have the whole puppet team are right there. They're controlling every movement. It's impressive what they can do now. So,
well, let's roll into it with. I mean, this is such a uniquely challenging visual effects project in that its underpinnings, regarding the characters all the way to the environments, all stem from this movie almost 4 decades ago. Plus, the new show is a prequel, so you have this kind of quagmire in terms of you're recreating the world, you have all these digital tools at your disposal, but I'm sure this came up a lot in discussion in development and during the show. How much do you push the digital versus how much do you preserve the traditional? Sean, do you want to kind of go into that a little bit, starting with pre-production?
Sure. So the company that I work for, Double Negative, DNEG, they worked with HENSON'S and Netflix to create a test. So the idea was out there. This occurred before I was a part of the project. Toby, you might be able to speak more to the history of that. But at that time, it was pushing the idea, trying to make visual effects for the Gelfling. So they would be all digital characters. The Skeksis would be all puppeted characters. And the environments in the immediate surroundings would be real physical sets, and then everything beyond, down the hallways or out the windows, anything like that would be visual effects. And so DNEG TV went through and did a test with the HENSON'S. Louis directed it. Kevin Clash, I believe, played the Skeksis in it. And then we animated a Gelfling character, which is not exactly any of the characters that are in the film, but related to a number of the Brea and Deep. And everybody looked at it and thought, "Wow, that it's really great." It was as my friend Steph Drury, who got me involved in the project, he was saying it is the best failure ever. So it was very successful. Everybody enjoyed it. Everybody looked at it and said, "You know what? That's great, and it's wrong. We need to stick with classic puppetry in order for it to be the Dark Crystal, the way that everybody remembers the Dark Crystal. It would be a mistake to make that big a leap into visual effects for it." So that then led to the choice among everyone that the puppets would, that all Gelfling, all of the Skeksis would come back. The set extension work was made sense to do as a visual effects kind of thing. And then we would do more nuanced things. So there are a lot of, when I guess as we get into it, there are limitations to what puppets are able to do and what puppeteers are able to do in a completely traditional sense. So visual effects, which is this new medium, still new, came in, and we can remove the puppeteer, or we can enhance the faces of any of the characters, or we can extend the environment and create a larger world than they were able to do in the film. And so that was sort of the balance that people thought, okay, this is the direction we'll take off in. Traditional puppeteering enhanced by visual effects.
So Toby, well, let's go into characters a little bit. So resurrecting these characters and creating new characters. What was the process in that, and how much was preserved from behind the scenes techniques versus enhancing with today's technologies?
I mean, the interesting thing is that, you know, in the film, you know, initially, yes, the most of the all the Skeksis were there and the Mystics, but there were only 2 Gelfling, so Jen and Kira, and you know, full puppets and everything. That was one of the biggest challenges for us, was being a prequel. And now at this time, there had been a lot more lore written. You know, there was all sorts of different things that had been written in canon and surrounding the Dark Crystal and different adventures, prequels and otherwise. So there was a lot more, there was a richer world, you know, than just the small sort of piece that was shown in the movie. But the biggest challenge was doing clans of Gelfling. There are 7 clans, and you know, so many that there were potential, you know, to have on screen. And the Gelflings were the hardest characters in certainly the original back then and now as well, because they are very human-like. You know, that's the problem, being when you get so close to something that we recognize as human, even though they're, you know, sort of fantasy or an animal-like, you judge them as people. We judge things a lot harder if it's human, and especially digitally or puppetry-wise. And so that's the ultimate challenge, is to make you believe in a character. And again, these characters were the ones that were on the adventure, so you were with them every episode. It wasn't, you know, they weren't coming in and out. You had to believe them and feel for them and really be taken and carry the story. So that was the most challenging part, I feel, because the Skeksis are fun. You know, they're big, sort of almost broad, you know, characters that have, you know, so many details and wrinkles, and they're strange creatures that you believe them when they come on screen. That's sort of an easy, I would say, thing to do. They and they're fun. You know, they're really, you're with them the whole time. So that was the leap. The nice thing about a prequel is that we had more characters to deal with. You know, more Skeksis, more of a landscape as well. You know, the land,
A much bigger world.
Yeah, it was expanding that. The idea that more things were alive at this time, because we were I don't know how long, trying before the movie.
And also, actually, hours more worth of story to tell, like 8. So, you know, movie being 2 hours, and we're working on a 10-hour series. So we're exploring this world with hours and hours more worth of experience to take every viewer on. So we have a lot more time to explore into every single character.
And I think that's actually a good point to make, is that, you know, for this, the film has been sort of held at such a high bar for people in the industry and around the world, for fans, that they love it so much, because it's, you know, it's affected people, because it was a piece of magic. No human appeared on screen. It was all puppets. And at that time, it was all in-camera tricks for the most part. You know, that was the amazing thing about it. Digital didn't exist.
That's right. The whole visual effects society was not in existence. I would imagine. I don't concretely know that, but why would they?
Yeah, and that was the really hard challenge, is that you want to keep that in mind. You want to honor that, yet we're in a modern age now with amazing technology advances. And that was the beauty of it. It was like trying to blend those two together, making sure we didn't leave the fans behind. We didn't lose the audience for what they loved about the original, but you could push so many boundaries. And it was in such easy ways these days, in some degrees, as far as green screen is involved. You know, we as when we build puppets, they're still puppets. They are fiberglass skulls, foam latex skins, or silicone and fabrics, and then you still have a puppeteer or several puppeteers attached somewhere, you know, either beneath them, behind them, inside of them, around them. So you've got bodies, you've got people that you still have to make disappear.
Above them, don't forget above them. There's
above them, below them. I mean, you know, so you're basically trying to move an inanimate object in a realistic way through a scene, a set, or something. And it takes a lot of people, mechanics, and ingenuity, and movement. And thought
process, right? We spent hours and days talking through. So Louis would come through and we would sit down in these early meetings where Louis took all of us, the entire key players of the crew, through every episode. And he would describe in an amazing amount of detail, considering he was pre-planning 10 hours and 2 years worth of shooting in advance, but he knew what he was doing and knew what he wanted. And he would say, this is the scene as the scene is going to unfold. And then we would look at it and be like, oh man, how do you can't, that doesn't, how do you do that? I mean, it's great that they did it in the movie, but in the movie they had a locked off camera and they would put a foreground matte painting and that would hide the puppeteer or whatever particular trick. But Louis would talk about, you know, I'm going to be on my Steadicam, and the Steadicam's an awesome camera, and I can constantly move, and it makes it energetic and exciting. And he was right, absolutely right. But for us to be able to then solve, like, right, okay, so Steadicam moving, no locked off. Ooh, how do we solve that? And so we would go back and forth saying, you know, how about this idea? What about, you know, maybe we could, you know, maybe there could be a bush that moves around. No, that would look terrible. We can't do that. Okay, well, we put the puppeteer in blue suit. Well, how do we erase that puppeteer then? And so every shot was something that we'd have to discuss based on Louis' grandiose vision of how could we execute that and what would be the best way to execute that so that we are sticking with traditional puppetry, because that is what people want to see, but using everything, every trick that visual effects has come up with for the past 30 odd years to be able to make it more exciting and engage audiences more, or today's audiences even more than they would be, you know, by paying homage to an old way of making films. So it was a lot of it. Everything was pre-planning. We spent hours together going through.
I think it's important. You were saying about Louis is that he, you know, he's an action director. He was, you know, and he came into this knowing what he wanted to do, and then he like you said, he showed us what he wanted along the way. Whether we believed him or not is a different matter. You know, we were always going, I have no idea how we're going to do that.
No one can do that. That's not possible.
Exactly. And puppets don't do that. How do you expect us to pull this off? And so it would be that thing, but he would go, no, I want this. This is what I want. I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to shoot it this way. And another thing from all this is the camera itself was moving the whole time. So puppet, like we said, you know, locked off camera is much better for puppeteering, because puppeteers like to get an eye line. They like to line up for a shot, just so you're ready, and you then can puppeteer to that shot. And that was really difficult. They had to learn how to not do that, because Louis could line you up, and then you go, no, but I'm going to move over here. So they've lost it or automatically. So it was a really fascinating ballet to just try and figure this out, to try and make sure that it was going to work, and for the puppeteers to have that big learning curve, and then for you guys, the visual effects, to, like, everything's moving all the time.
I think maybe the for all the planning that we would do, right, months worth of meetings where we would talk to one another and make these great plans. And Louis is amazing, and as you said, he's an action director and he's a director, so he's not static. His camera is not static, and he's not static, and you feed him. So he comes up with an idea, and we, Toby and I, and many other people together would work. We'd be like, oh, okay, you know, wow, that one was really hard, but we've solved that. We figured out how to get there. And then 2 weeks before we're about to shoot whatever it was that we planned out, Louis says, you know what, I've got a new idea. Because you guys have given me so much, I'm going to change it to this new way. So well, we've got 2 weeks, we can figure it out. Okay, well, oh God, I'm tired, but okay, here's how we'll do it. And then you get to the day of the shoot, if not several times up to the day of the shoot, and you get there, and it's not the original plan, it's not the revised plan, it's not any of the many revised plans. It's in the moment, Louis doing something else. And so visual effects wise, we had to sort of be always prepared for anything, no matter what it was. We had to scan every set and not every puppet. We didn't scan the Skeksis, but we scanned every Gelfling that we could, and every set, and we had digital environments everywhere, and we were as ready as possible, and you know, to be light on our feet. I learned very early on that being rigid to a plan. If this is what Louis had said, this is what we're doing. Great, we go out, and that's not what we're doing. So if you try and say, this is what we must do, this is what we talked about, it's going to break the system. It's going to break the fluidity of, I think, what kind of puppetry is, you know, you're taking advantage, you're in the moment. Puppets change, and you get this weird foot comes forward and it's twisted just a little bit off to the side, and that looks perfect, and nobody knew that would look perfect, because that's crazy. But the only way for visual effects to keep up with that is to sort of you know, it's like a very zen place to be, where you have to not have any preconceived notions, and yet you have to bring everything that you've learned from your history in visual effects, and how to solve problems or problem solve everything. You got to bring that to the table, and you got to be live with that. So you're doing visual effects in a way like the way puppetry is done, where it's live and in the moment. You have to, that's just it. You can't structure it, because it doesn't work as a structure.
Absolutely. And even for us, we had to become more fluid because we have to, for a puppet, an inanimate object, basically a doll, you know, to a degree, you have to rig it. You have to put rods and different strings and different things in different places for any shot. Every single shot has a different setup, and we're doing multiple shots a day. And so you're rigging every time multiple puppets. And so it's a challenge, but we had to be fluid with Louis, with the direction that he wanted to go. And so it was, again, and then also not catch you guys up, like just like not do something too crazy that we're not gonna screw everything else. And that was the really cool balance. But actually what really, after all of that, after all the chaos of these 2 years that we did it, Louis' vision, you can see it on the screen. That trailer that you saw at the beginning shows the triumph that came out of this whole thing. You know, it's beautiful. It really is.
It's passionate, I think, is what it comes down to. Everybody who worked on it wanted to be there and wanted it to be amazing. they wanted it to be the thing that they remembered the movie being, but 38 years later, where we have so much more, our kung fu is stronger. We have better kung fu now, and you wanted to bring your best kung fu to the game so that it was everything that you remembered and everything that it could be.
Well, there's definitely something to be said about childhood memories. I mean, we've all had those moments where we've had fond memories of a movie, and you're like, oh, okay, great, it's available on on demand. Let's check it out, and then it's just like, well, wait a minute, that's not quite what I remember because of the limitations of the time. So you're also kind of grappling with that as well, and bringing it forward to, in a sense, preserve people's memories of what they perceive as what they experienced when they were a child too.
Yeah, that's right. Perception. It's all a perception thing. Almost everything we're talking about is perception. The puppets are not inanimate things, they're living things, and your perspective on those things when you were 38 years younger is different than what it is today, and your ability to see the way our entire industry, the visual effects, as we said, it didn't even exist 38 years ago, and to be able to then apply it now in a way that is successful relative to this old product and this ancient technique of puppetry. And I don't know, puppetry is thousands of years old. And so to make this modern version of an ancient art form, well, it's an awesome responsibility and hopefully fairly successful.
Yeah.
Well, Sean and Toby, let me maybe talk about the environments. And Sean, feel free to, if you want to share something, go right ahead and share something. Feel free.
Okay. Well, maybe that's a good segue into so special effects, right? So it's obviously visual effects and special effects. John Savage was the special effects supervisor on the film, and he and Toby and I and Phil, who was the supervising art director, we spent an enormous amount of time together, and we applied for one of the categories in the Visual Effects Awards, and were able to be successful. So maybe it's worth showing the application of the Physical Effects Award at this point in time. So let me figure out share screen, and then we can go from there, which will
The Dark Crystal Age of Resistance is one of the largest puppet shows ever created for television, with over 170 puppets and 75 sets built to populate a sprawling fantasy world.
So long!
It is also one of the most complex puppet shows ever shot, putting puppets on camera in ways never before seen on film.
It's good to see you, Rianne.
This action sequence from episode 5 is a perfect example of the way in which the show does this, using a unique blend of practical effects and puppetry, never leaning too much on CGI. Given this methodology essentially makes every frame a trick shot, storyboards like this were essential in identifying specific challenges. For example, where do we hide the puppeteers in the frame? Do the puppets interact with the set? If so, what rig is required for this? Do the puppets interact with each other? How do we make it feel like they're clinging to the side of a speeding vehicle? Or, for wider shots, how do we rig the puppets' legs in a way that has weight and feels real? How do they fly through the air? With the exception of some minor enhancements, the removal of puppeteers or rods from certain shots, and the background comp, every frame in this sequence displays innovative and creative practical solutions to these problems.
Yeah, all right. Oh,
Just,
sorry.
Very
just
cool.
looking at that was amazing. It's just hilarious just to see. So yeah, when they first did the carriage sequence, we were like, well, so the carriage is moving and then it crashes and all this. I was like, okay, so how do we do that?
Would you,
Yeah,
would you
puppets don't do
say,
that.
Yeah.
we do have a question. Have you had any very complicated or impossible to shoot sequences? And if so, what is that? What is it that made it so complex? Would you say the carriage sequence qualifies as one of those?
It qualifies as one, but only one of many. But having just shown a big thing of it, it's probably a good idea to talk about. But every episode had something that was impossible for us to do, that we had to figure out some way to accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, it always depended on what, for us, what a puppet had to do, or several puppets had to do. I think making Rianne flip and spin, feels complicated, but actually, we're able to do it with rods and spins, and you break a sequence down. Every shot is an effect. So you break it down into little pieces, into the cuts. And Louis liked to cut quickly, so it was really useful because it meant for action sequences we could do one moment and re-rig, and one moment and re-rig, and that sort of thing to help along the way. It's just keeping track of how those moments coincide with each other. I think it's more when you have all of the Skeksis on set, or all the Skeksis, some podlings, and all the other creatures. That's really hard to navigate. You've got so many puppeteers and people and bodies to move, as well as trying to get a shot. Those, for us, that was always complex. Big days, especially when they had armor on.
Well, this is a good, appropriate question for right now. Someone just asked, talk about the facial enhancements that were done. Obviously, the Skeksis versus the Gelflings.
Yeah.
The subtleties in the facial expressions are different just by design, for one thing, and then on top of that, let us know what you did.
Sure.
So both Skeksis and Gelfling have different kinds of facial enhancements. For the Skeksis, we mostly added CG tongue work to the Skeksis. So puppets, puppets are great, but they don't. The puppeteer is only able to do so many motions by being one puppeteer, and you add a second puppeteer, and then there's a workload on top of the visual effects team to remove a second puppeteer, a third puppeteer. So the more nuanced the acting of the puppet gets, the more puppeteers there are, and then the more work and I guess potentially the greater the giveaway to what we're doing. To the trickery. So you want the minimum amount of puppeteers in there, and in the Skeksis, there's one main puppeteer who runs the head and is doing a version of the voice for everybody to act from. But the secondary eyebrows and tongues and nostril flares, anything that might give an additional bit of character, becomes harder. There's maybe an additional puppeteer off screen who's running servos. Again, the puppeteer has to hold this head up. So if you put 2 servos for each eyebrow inside of the puppet's head, ooh, that's heavier. And then you put another servo for nostril flares, and it's heavier. So the more gear that goes into the puppet's head, the harder it is for the puppeteer to be able to create that illusion. And so we were able to add a lot of life to the Skeksis by adding tongues to them. It was a thing. Again, it comes from Louis. Louis was very super interested. He was ecstatic. He would get like crazy excited when we would add tongues into the puppets. And there was a test that was done early on, and in that the puppet, the Skeksis mouths were all green inside, green or blue. I'm not actually sure. Again, it was before I was part of the project, but we always would have to rebuild the inside of the mouth and add a tongue. We chose on the project overall that we would get the creature shop and Toby to sculpt mouths into the Skeksis heads so that they looked like they were there, and then only when necessary we would add a CG tongue. But because they're kind of, the Skeksis are these weird dinosaur birds, the tongue adds a lot to the way that they act and the way that they look. So we would go through, and there would some episodes had hundreds of Skeksis tongues being added, just making them sort of curling, dog yawning, spitting out, creepier. It added a layer to the way that the Skeksis, to the creepy nature of what the Skeksis were. Then in terms of the Gelfling, we knew right from the very beginning that because the puppets are so if you imagine a Skeksis, it's an actor, and their arm is going up through into the head, it's a puppeteer, and their arm is going up through into the head of the way that that sort of bird-like head. For a Gelfling, Gelflings are half or maybe a third of the size of a Skeksis, so they need to be puppeteered from under the floor. The floors of all the sets are raised up 4 feet off the ground. There are puppeteers underneath, and their hands go up through the body in a variety of different ways, and then into the head, and they puppeteer mostly just the head, and then a second puppeteer is off screen running some RC servo-oriented parts of the puppeteer's head.
The heroes, all the hero Gelflings had servos in their heads, but it's like puppeteered mouths, and on top you have a bank of servos, which is eye blinks, ear wiggle, and brow movement. Certainly for the 8 heroes we did for that. But there are so many of those that you can't servo everybody. So we did a bunch of heroes and secondary ones which didn't have any movement. We just had hand puppets. Then they didn't have eye movements or eyebrows, maybe an ear wiggle, but that was it. You could position the eyes.
And every servo adds weight. So the puppeteers are holding their arms up, and the puppeteers were amazing, but they're in agony. They need like physio every day because they're holding up all these mechanics and fiberglass skulls and foam latex heads and servos and monitors that they're wearing around their waist, and all of these physical restrictions of the real world for them to be able to do their job. And so one of the things that we knew we would add is Gelflings, especially the Gelflings, we would add facial enhancements. And during pre-production, we spent a lot of time scanning the various puppets, the various characters, especially the Gelflings, and then working on a 2D nuke-oriented way of adjusting very small things, just eyebrows. So we would bring the 3D puppet into Nuke, and we built a rig setup that we had sliders, so you could get a little bit of lift on the corners of the mouth, or a little bit of nose flare, or a little bit of eyebrows, or a little bit of squint. We always knew we would have to do blinks. For blinks is I think, Toby, maybe you speak to this, but I think the internal architecture of being able to make a puppet blink adds a lot of weight to the puppet itself, and so
it does. Yeah, I mean, an eye rig it's a whole block, really. It is, and it requires about 4 servos time, and it is heavy, but it's not. What actually happens is that that's a full build piece, so it's to keep it all in balance. You do that for the heroes, and because you had developed this this system to be able to make Gelflings blink really successfully, I find, that it was that we could do the backgrounds when you weren't seeing them all the time, when you just see them for certain shots or certain crowds, you'd be able to just make them blink. The one that you had to do all of, which was Deet. That was because her eyes were bigger, but they were also slightly offset on the axis, because it requires, the eye blinks require certain axes to work on. So as soon as you shift that, it became harder for the skin to go over the big eyes and keep it looking cute and sweet as Deet is. So I think that was very early. That was one of the first ones decided on, that you guys were going to take care of her eyes. And that was a challenge because they have eyelashes as well.
Yeah, that's right. Eyelashes. And we had to, again, with Louis, we had to explore what do humans blink. Because, again, the fact that the viewer identifies with Gelfling more than any other character across the whole film. So you need to find the sweet spot in between too weird and too normal, too human, because it doesn't make any sense. For example, in the film, Gelfling were, when they were in a wide shot, a Gelfling was actually a child in a costume. Running around, and that was maybe one of the things that was it kind of was uncanny. People couldn't quite figure out, like, why does that look like a human being in a costume running around, and so it was too far in one way. And then if we step in and we do too much computer graphics, that would be weird in another way. So there's a very narrow corridor of success to being able to make the faces of these Gelfling, which are human-like and identified as human but aren't human, to be able to suspension of disbelief, I guess. Finding that sweet spot of the suspension of disbelief was very hard. And so we started in pre-production. We scanned the puppets. We built this rig. And then eventually, as shots came in, and there were often 200 or 300 shots per episode, where we would just be very subtly enhancing either blinks on Deet, or Rianne, might lift one tiny eyebrow in a way that, might be 20 or 30 pixels worth of just one eyebrow cocking up. But that's just enough to offset what the servos were able to do, to take it into a place where everybody would buy into it and say, oh, well, they feel like they're offset, realistic characters.
And it's all driven by performance.
Yes.
And performance driven by story. Would you say, and it's interesting technically that you said you came up with a 2D nuke solution. Was that the case? One of our members, Elizabeth, was wondering, was that the case with the mouth tracking as well? Was it 2D or like a 3D, animated 3D space?
For the tongues, you mean for the Skeksis tongues that we were putting in, would be 3D tracked, and then a 3D model. Every Skeksis mouth and tongue we would scan and build a 3D model. We would track it in 3D and then be able to put in 3D tongues and a 3D mouth process. Because as soon as you take the tongue and lift it up, you expose a gap of the bottom of the mouth or the top of the mouth. And so even though it's deep in the blacks, you need to fill that in. So mouth tracking tended to be more 3D, unless it was just, if you're looking at me and I smile, that is something that you can accomplish as a 2D trick and using our 2D nuke-oriented tools. But again, that tended to be more Gelfling-oriented than Skeksis-oriented.
Toby, did you have something you wanted to add?
It was just that the what Sean was talking about, it was puppeteer driven. The characters, you had to, as the VFX, had to go to what the puppeteer could do. Character wise, they developed the character in real time, live on set, gave the performance, and then you guys had to work with that. It was always figuring out how to make that or take that performance and make it run and make it move and make it emote just a little more. It's pushing that boundary, but always grounded within the puppeteering. And I think it was Breya and her mechanical head. It was beautiful. It was set up in a new rig, so that Alice Deneen, the hero puppeteer for Breya, had basically like a Wii controller on one of her hands, the Gelfling's hands. So she controlled the eye movement and brow movement with her the whole time. And so her subtlety of puppeteering and performance was captured on set. And then I think that information helped drive a little more of, a Gelfling, nuance in other characters along the way. Because she did a beautiful job. The system worked really well, but you actually got a performance. It was live. That was the fascinating thing, is watching these characters. They made mistakes, just like actors do. All of those things, and you captured something that was real, and was able to then enhance that and move along.
So
maybe.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So I think this segues into William's question, which is, so the notion of digital enhancing or VFX enhancing, a lot of pre-planning, but also open to on-set decisions as well as post solutions.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, you had to be fleet-footed and fancy-free the entire part of the entire project, in every way. I guess another of the many things, right? And we'll never get to talk about, I realize now, we can't take 2 years and distill it down into an hour-long conversation or anything. But one of the things that we went through was how to get Gelfling to walk. I kind of mentioned earlier that in the film there were actors, children actors, who would dress up in Gelfling costumes and they would walk across landscapes. And
the original film.
Yeah, in the original film. And then that approached in a weird way, although it was real, it approached Uncanny Valley, which is the thing that we have to fight against in visual effects on a regular basis. And I guess for me, having human actors and the human architecture run a Gelfling was it got weird. And so we then took in our series that we were working on, we scanned all the characters, so our proportions, our skeletal proportions would be correct relative to all the designs of the Gelflings that Toby and the rest of the Creature Workshop and everybody came up with, and HENSON'S. So that was our base point. And then we went through and our first path, speaking to the how to be adaptable, how do you adapt? So we had to try many different things. So our first try was, well, what would it be like? Let's try and animate this digital double as though we were animating puppets. So we would attach rods to the puppets and we would animate the puppeteer that would be puppeteering a puppet, or we would animate the hand of a puppet of a puppeteer that was running the speech pattern of one of the digital doubles. Anything that could take us and sort of remove the visual effects artist by one layer, like the puppeteer was removed one layer from the puppet. And we had some successes and some failures in that. And then we went in and looked at it. Okay, well, maybe if that doesn't work, maybe we should pretend we're being the Gelfling. And so we would think about it from the point of view like, oh, well, I'm Rianne, the animator. I'm Rianne, and I'm going to get in and I will run through the scene the way that Rianne would have to run through the scene. Okay, well, that doesn't quite work either. Okay, and then we would mix these various levels of what would the puppeteer have to do and what would the actual character have to do, and then what was it that the viewer expected from that kind of weird uncanny valley character inside of a dressed costume, a human character pretending that they were being a gelfling a long time ago. And how do we mix now these three things to be able to get the level that that elicits a response from the audience that says, oh, we're making the thing that is correct, is puppet-like, but isn't an actual puppet. It's a CG interpretation of that puppet. And how can we, kind of deliver on the expectation? I guess that's what it comes down to, because there is an expectation to what is every character going to be like.
Right.
I think
go ahead.
to say that that Sean, like you said earlier, we all stood on set a lot, like every day, every morning, whatever we were shooting that day, that week, we would, and pre-planning and meetings, but we were always together, we were always together on set in different places, as different teams, and Sean and I and all the others, we would be standing around trying to figure that out. And it was always a balance. It was like, all right, this is what needs to happen in this scene. How do we achieve it? Do VFX take this? Can we make a puppet get to here? And then can you take over? What, something has to move in the scene. Is that practical, or is that going to be digital? We would always go back and forth. And more times than not, it was a creative conversation. That was the beauty of it. It was never purely technical. It was never like it was never a contest of who was going to do what. It was always about, how do we achieve the best thing for that moment?
That's right. There was collaboration. It was always a collaboration of what can you offer, and how can you present it in a way that Louis is the vizier, who decides, oh, we're going to do this and not this, and you would present your ideas and your arguments and your thoughts, and very respectful, I would say. I come from stop motion puppetry. Toby, I think you work in stop motion puppetry now, so we have a history that is similar, and finding a way, because it was always about finding a way to pay homage to the original, rather than that now it's visual effects. Now we where everything is visual effects. Look what we can do in visual effects, and that would be the wrong approach to both this and probably everywhere. But certainly for this, it didn't make any sense to just do it as a visual effect because you can. It had to be the right solution.
Well, Sean, you hit it right on the nose. It's such an amazing process and development that you guys pulled off. Congratulations. But of course, 2 years into an hour ain't going to happen. But I do want to touch upon environments a little bit, because the environments are just so beautiful, from set design, construction, as well as your extreme wide shots of establishing the different lands. Could we show some material and also talk about that a little bit?
We can show, I believe, some material, and we can talk about it. Let's see. File. Shall I? I think this is the right movie. And let me share screen and Zoom. This is the right movie. I apologize if this isn't the right movie. Share. Oh no, this is
in episode 8.
Sorry, that's Red the Threader. That is not the right movie. Before and afters, environments. Well, now I have to figure out which one is the environments movie. But I will say, while I'm trying to figure it out, let me speak to the cause. One of Louis' things was always making sure that environments were based in some kind of reality, but were also in a world that it had to be Thra. It was never going to be Earth. We didn't want to go to Earth. So visual effects wise, we were always going to have to take and mix and match. So we would take a mountain range from India, a desert from Africa, and forests from the Pacific Northwest. And we were going to have to mix those into a single world. And so a lot of the big extreme wides were always found via stock footage. And we spent years. One of the first things I remember talking about was how are we going to deal with this, and it was one of the last things we were ever able to deliver on was the final establishers of the film, and so we would go through and we would present to Louis these ideas that, you know, here is Harar. So Harar started off, and it was a mountainous place near the ocean, and we'd look around and we finally found this a part of Norway where the fjords in Norway felt like what Gavin Bouquet, who was the production designer, he had designed this world, and we were able to find kind of a physical real world place, and then we were able to find footage. Sometimes we were able to find 4K footage, which we were eventually delivering the final product in. Oftentimes we would find 2K or even PAL-res footage, and we had to do a lot of tech work you know, tech work in the background where we would recreate the footage by adding density and layers to being able to make it res it up, basically to res up things to 4K. And then on top of that, we would have to add 3 suns, because Thra always has 3 suns. There's never a time that you go to Thra that you can't see 3 suns. And then we would have to add a mountain range or an ocean to the background, and then some islands out in the back, in the deep background. And then we would have to add the carriage in the foreground, and we would have to add the city of Harar, all to a PAL-res plate that we were finding from somebody who might have advertised it as being 4K, but it never really was. So environments was certainly became a huge challenge for us to get for the, you know, couple of 100 shots across the whole series that we did.
I did find a clip, a reel on the Endless Forest. Do you want me to play that?
Sure, if you want to, because I've been talking, so I haven't actually been looking. Sorry.
No worries. I'll share it right now.
In episode 2 of The Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance, we are introduced to the Endless Forest for the very first time. The forest was a partial set built in modular sections to allow for multiple configurations as required by the script. We digitally scanned these sections, allowing us to create bespoke modelled and textured set extensions, which blended seamlessly with the set pieces. An array of background trees were created using SpeedTree, then brought into Houdini using proprietary tools to allow for the fast layout of scenes per shot. Tree position, scale, variance and animation could all be controlled and set in real time. Final layouts were then exported as point clouds and imported into Clarice, where high-resolution tree and leaf geometry was instanced onto the points for rendering. Remaining set dressing, texture and detail was achieved using a combination of Clarice scatterers, digital matte painting, practical elements on cards and proprietary Nuke tools. These tools helped to fill out detail, dress the more complex roto edges and deal with the particularly tricky on-set light bleeding, atmosphere and depth cueing. This combination of traditional artistry and technical toolsets allowed us to successfully and efficiently emulate and expand the richly textured sets of the Endless Forest. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Very cool.
But yeah, so the Endless Forest, which is by its very nature endless, and from what I think maybe, you know, there's sort of a story that I heard, Toby, maybe you know more about it, but something that your dad said, which is that the Endless Forest is endless, but it's endless not only on Thra, it's endless through, or who knows what other dimensions of reality and planets. So trying to make that description of a forest into a physical thing based on what is a couple of 100 feet worth of set and trees, that was an exceptional challenge.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I mean, it was a challenge. It was amazing to see that, because it was only, like you say, a couple 100 feet of set, and it moved. It was the endless forest, because it was always moving around. It was always being shifted to create different angles and aspects of this vast forest that was never, we never see the whole thing. You're never meant to see the whole thing, but you had to actually create enough of it to make you feel like it truly exists, in the world.
That's right. It was endless.
Yeah.
One of the there's so many different aspects to it. One of the carriage chase that I think we saw earlier in in one of either the trailer or the special effects submission talks about how the endless forest is used, and in the carriage chase we had to we scanned everything. We would always scan everything. Basically every set we would make scans of, because who knows what the post-production process will bring up. But then we also went, in the carriage chase, we went to a place on the border between England and Wales called Puzzlewood, which is a pretty well-known National Trust land. I believe it's National Trust land here in the UK. And it has these small walking paths, and Louis wanted to have the carriage running down through the endless forest and these amazing sort of, I think it was an old, it was a Roman mine. The story that I understand, it was a Roman mine. The mine eventually collapsed, and because it's very rainy up near Wales and on Western England, there's moss and trees, and it's now, since between Roman times, now it's grown up and become this incredibly sort of wild place. And there are walking paths that are maybe a foot wide, and Louis wanted the carriage as a real world thing, which is maybe 20 or 30 feet long. He wanted it to fit on these walking paths. So we went through and were able to scale down it was like a mathematical equation. How would we take the carriage and scale it so that it worked in this particular portion of the endless forest? And I did a bunch of math and figured out, okay, well, let's make it 10%. We'll make it 10% of the size of its real world size in order to make this real world forest seem, 10 times larger than what it really is, and make it a magical environment that no one is used to. No one knows what it is. And so we went through and we got a Steadicam operator to run up and down every path throughout this park called Puzzlewood, but holding the Steadicam, a low slung version of the Steadicam, for 3 or 4 days. We did this, and then Louis came in and he did it as well, because he was his own Steadicam operator and wanted to make sure he put his touch and gave us the sort of the extra Louis touch to everything. But the cameras had to be underslung and would ride about 6 inches off the ground, and the operator had to walk as fast as they possibly could. And that, when you do the math of trying to figure out how does a carriage move 30 or 40 miles an hour, and how do you take that into a 10% size world that's 10 times larger, it becomes just about what a camera operator is able to do without falling over and tripping, or run the Steadicam into a rock that comes very close onto the side of it. And so we spent a week in Puzzlewood filming all the backgrounds for the carriage chase, and then we used a post-viz team to then choose. So we would shoot in every section of the park, we would shoot running forward, running backward, 3/4 left, 3/4 right, 3/4 backwards. And then the post-viz team was able to take all of that footage and apply it to what we had gone through on a green screen stage with the puppeteers and the carriage and the various puppets as they jump around from wheel to wheel and inside, and the Skeksis are inside, and there's dialogue, and figure out a way to assemble a world. But again, sort of speaking to how we had to stay very light and sort of inspirational to what anything would become. We only figured out in post how we would use the footage that we captured, which was extensive, to the shots that Louis and the rest of the crew were able to get on stage on blue screen and marry those together. And the sequence started out, I think, we'd originally planned on and budgeted, I don't know, let's say a minute worth of screen time, and let's call it 50 shots, and it ended up being sort of like 200 shots and 5 minutes worth of screen time. So and that was always the lesson. Just keep open-minded towards what Louis is going to want to change it into, and just always make sure you've captured everything that you can to be able to apply it to the problems that you don't know what those problems might become in the long run.
And we have a question from one of our guest members, David. He was wondering regarding the set scans, did that come in as an invaluable asset for doing paint out work?
Always. So one of the things about puppets is that they're puppeteers. And I think I was mentioning earlier, or Toby was, I'm not sure, that every set is built 4 feet off the ground. And every set is built on 4-foot cubes that can be lifted out and removed. The floor is built on this sort of structural, it's kind of like Legos. You can take any piece out to get a puppet in relative to the correct background, and then you can drop it back in and remove next door. So if one scene the puppet's here, the next scene the puppet's here, or you have a camera that's looking this way and then this way, you can move any direction and any way. So from the art department side, they had to be as adaptable to the story as we had to, or the puppeteers had to. But inevitably, there would be times where you're looking back that way and, oh, a minute ago, we were 4-foot sections further in the background. We've moved over here. Nobody's been able to put that section back in, so we're going to have to fill that in because it doesn't make sense to stop for the half hour that it would take to reapply that background bit of floor. So we scanned every set, and then we had the ability to use those scans to fill in the background easily if anything showed through. So yeah, scanning was the visual effects get out of jail card on really every different aspect of the whole show, of all 10 episodes.
Well, gentlemen, this is such a fascinating discussion, and I can go on and on and on with further questions, but we are unfortunately nearing the end of our presentation here. Usually what I like to do in closing, unless you guys have something that you want to say specifically, I usually end a Q&A with a very simple question, which is, you've worked so hard on this project, and you've devoted your life's experience and care to the project. What do each of you personally come away with working on the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance? And not necessarily from a technical perspective, but personally, what does this experience mean for you both?
Go ahead. I'll let you go first, Toby.
For me, it was everything. It was from the ability to work with family, from the ability to work with a team of the most passionate people, artists and creatives in one space that I've ever seen. I mean, that's what's amazing about it. We spent so long together, you know, either in the States initially and then in England whilst filming in the big crew. We spent so long together, day in, day out, in hard conditions, you know, trying to make things work and function. But it was such a family. It was such a wonderful, creative environment. And at no point did I not want to be a part of it or be there. It's an honor to be a part of that and to help the vision come to life. And it was just magic. You know, what I brought from it was true magic. That's what I keep with me as well. And it's the idea that I hope to strive to get to do something else like that in my life. You know, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, I think, for a lot of us. And that this doesn't come along. I don't think, you know, people's puppets and creative fantasy in that way in such high regard, I think it's amazing. It really is amazing. And the end result is stunning, and I'm so proud of it, of what everyone achieved and what we presented to the world. You know, I think it's a masterpiece in itself.
Yeah, I would speak to family in a way as well, but slightly differently. So obviously my family wasn't involved in the original version of it, so I don't have Toby's history to it, but it is a new family of people that I now know, and you know, super talented artists and artistry, and I've always appreciated puppetry, but knowing so much more about it now, you know, and it's kind of like puppetry is a bit of my career is devoted into puppetry, from stop motion and the Muppets and now the Dark Crystal, but it feels like I've met a community more now than ever before, and a family more now than ever before, that you know, I feel like it will be a part of my family from this day forward, or from 2 years ago forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Well, on that note, I think we need to wrap. Toby.
Oh.
Yep.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, Toby and Sean, I just wanted to say thank you so much. And of course, congratulations on the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance.
Thank you.
Bringing a beloved classic back to life for fans and new viewers to enjoy for generations to come. Huge accomplishment. We'll do this again in 38 years, yes?
Absolutely.
There we go. Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
In parting, I'd like to also thank our Visual Effects Society members from all around the world for joining us in this discussion today. And to also, quick note, to look for further events, not unlike this one, VFX Pros Home Edition, on the visualeffectssociety.com website, as well as vfxvoice.com. And behind the scenes, I'd like to give a big shout out to Netflix's Julie Miller, the Visual Effects Society's main office, Jeff Casper, and Ben Schneider, and also my colleague, VES Communications Director Naomi Goldman, who also hosts a lot of these events and does a fantastic job. This event certainly would not be possible without the contributions of all of those people. So thank you so much. I think that's a wrap until 38 years from now. And signing off, thank you and be safe.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Bye.